Hi everyone, we will start in a few minutes. We're just waiting for a few more people to join and then we will kick off. Thanks for your patience.
Oh, this is Kendra. Hey, Kendra.
Hi, Irma. Nice to actually see you face to
Hi.
face.
Sorry, there's a special hello. Apologies, but we've just been emailing, so that's really good. Thanks for coming. Yeah.
And for those just joining, we're just waiting a minute or so just to allow a few more people to join and then we will kick off.
It's being recorded. Oh, oops. Continue.
Okay, I think we will get started and we can let people in as they continue to join. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining what is now the sixth in the series of workshops hosted by Social Impact Hub as part of the RISE program. This program is supported by Westpac Foundation and Paul Ramsey Foundation, and we're very grateful for their support to be able to offer these workshops to you. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. For me, that is the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, as well as extending this more broadly, acknowledging we're collectively dialing in from a range of locations today. My name's Rob, and alongside Jess and the broader social impact team, it's been a real pleasure to put together this series of workshops. And we've had a range of fantastic people and organisations in the for-purpose sector in the development of this series of topics for you. Just quickly before we dive in and I hand over to Irma, who's our facilitator for today, just some online housekeeping, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with now. Just please keep yourself on mute whilst we go through some of the materials. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to use the chat function in Zoom and we will do our best to answer those as we go through. Today's session, we're going to try and make it as interactive as possible. We found that there's an awesome opportunity as well as learning about branding today just for all of us to meet each other and collaborate and learn from each other as well. So to the extent you can, please put your cameras on so we can see your faces. And then finally, if you have any technical challenges, please reach out either just in the chat or privately to Jess or myself, and we'll do our best to help you. That's everything from me. I'm going to pass over to Irma, who is going to facilitate the session today on branding. Thank you, Irma. Over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Rob. So thank you everyone for sharing your time. I'm not sure how many of you have been attending these sessions, but obviously I've been part of the Social Impact Hub for quite a few years now, and it's really been a great journey for me. So thanks for taking time. Now, I acknowledge that we're in different parts of the branding journey. So I think both from whether a business has been set up or whether you're actually branded or even rebranded yourself, you're actually either new to branding or an expert at branding. But my job today is to hopefully stimulate you into thinking. So whether it's reinforcing things that you already know about brands or actually rethinking things or even stimulating new thinking, I'd love for you to walk away with those. So, what is the next 90 minutes about, which I'm very glad you're sharing with us, is that I'm actually almost thinking it's a bit of a journey of my 31 years in branding. Now, you heard that right. So it's actually, I'm not going to give you a CV and a rundown of everything I've done in 31 years, but just really the three sections are almost a story of my branding life. So one is the fundamentals of branding. So almost 31 years ago, I started as an assistant brand manager at Procter & Gamble. It's the temple of brand management, as they said. And I handled suddenly big brands like Oil of Olay. And for people in the room who already have 31 years experiences as I do, it was called Oil of Yulan, Oil of Olaz, Oil of whatever. And our task was to globalize and unify that brand. So the reason I'm sharing this is the fundamentals of branding haven't really changed. Like people tell me, Irma, how are you staying relevant in a world where, everything's just moved fast? You don't even have a TikTok account. But the reality is marketing has changed. The way we communicate has changed, but the fundamentals of branding still stay true. And that's because it's about people. Branding is about connecting your brands to people, and fundamentally people have the same needs, and this is what we're delivering on. So I'd love to share these fundamentals with you. It may be basic for some of you, but you go, you know what, this is how I'm going to talk to people, and this is how I'm going to connect my brand to them. The second part of the discussion, or the talk this lunchtime, is really that other part of my journey, which is my foray, or my almost serendipitous getting into the world of good, the social good. So I'd love to be able to share with you, the experiences I've had transitioning from the very much for-profit world and getting into the world of good, and what we've learned from a branding perspective. And thirdly, I'm calling it the third F, is the fun side of it, which is the design element and bringing it to life. We're not going to spend that much time, but how does this brand that we talk about get into the world of, visual things that we actually see? So that's a bit of a heavy agenda for 90 minutes. We'll just see how we go, but hopefully, yeah, we'll be able to get some of you interacting as well. So as a first port of call, though, let's just get ourselves into the headspace of branding. Jess lovingly will put you into little pods. And if you can actually just answer 2 questions, just very briefly. What's your name? If you've got a current business, or if you've got a role in whatever organization that you are with. And secondly, just a brand that you admire. Now, don't overthink it. Just say, this is a brand I admire most and why. So introduce yourselves to each other. I think, Jess, we're giving them about 2 minutes. Power workshop, 2 minutes. 2 questions, name, and then the brand you admire. So we'll see you in about 2 minutes. We're not.
Everyone's back.
They're back?
Yeah.
Oh God, you're efficient. So guys, welcome back. And for those who've joined us, I'll give you a little primer again after we do this, but very quickly, well, we're not going to let you report back, but if you want to just pop in the chat rooms, what sort of brands you actually admire, because Jess and I are tracking how these are changing as we go through these workshops. They'll just be good if you've got a bit of, apologies, we won't have time to obviously ask you in a bit more detail, but just from having run these sessions, what's interesting is, as I've said, I've seen this even evolve in terms of branding or brands that people admire. So I used to say, having run workshops for the last 20 years or so, is if I get paid $1 for every apple that gets brought up in a workshop, I could actually be retiring now, right? But that has actually changed. When I started doing this more recently, people are now talking about Patagonia, because of the 3 Ps, obviously, the people, planet, and purpose. And now, I mean, brands like Who Gives a Crap? Like, who would have thought that a toilet paper could actually be a brand that you admire the most? But you can really see that the culture is shifting, and I'm calling it beautilitarian, making something useful and beautiful and actually good for you is kind of coming up. So I'm not sure, as I said, in an ideal world, I'd love everyone to share their brands, but it's just a point of view in terms of saying that brand, for us to like it, has obviously represent a bit more than just the logo or the product it sells, but what it actually stands for. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, just as a bit of a caveat, I think for those who've joined late, I said that this talk would actually be a journey of my 31 years in branding, and I talk about the fundamentals, but my favorite brand, and this is a bit of a bias because I'm using this as a case study, is the Bread and Butter Project. I'm not sure if most of you are familiar with it, but it is the social enterprise by the Burke Street Bakery, and they sell sourdough and artisan baked goods. And I'm going to actually use it almost as an example as I go through the journey. I think some of you are nodding, and some of you might even be working for them. So we'll just use it as an example and use it to pipe in any other insights that you've got. So on that note, as I said, let's talk about brand strategy. The good news is, as I've said, 31 years later, I am still using the frameworks that I've learned from Procter & Gamble in terms of how to approach branding. People's needs fundamentally don't change. We just dial up one bit or the other. People are going to want comfort, safety, and familiarity, or excitement, challenges, and exploration. But again, what's changing that I've seen is that need for doing good, being responsible, and actually being a bit more of a contributing citizen to the community is now a bit emerging. So I'll talk about that in a second. In my second section. So let's first talk about the building blocks of a great brand. Um, Now, I know whenever we talk branding, this just kind of, there's 500 definitions of branding for those of you who've actually taken all these branding courses. But I like this definition of your brand is not what you say it is. Fundamentally, it's what they, meaning your outside audience, your customers, say it is. So not to belittle what we do, but it is actually, at the end of the day, when I work with social enterprises, we feel so passionate about the brand. This is what we think it is. But if you ask someone, you go, oh, who gives a crap? It's those funky toilet papers that actually, donate a bit of their profits, right? So it's exactly how it translates. Now, the real holy grail for us is that what we say the brand is actually what our customers or consumers or target audiences would say as well. So that's our task today, is to define our brand in a way that when we communicate the message to the people that we're targeting would actually be almost congruent to how we want the brand to be. A thought that I said earlier was I don't have a TikTok account and all that stuff. I'm obviously in all the other social media, but social media has actually given the hands as well to the public in terms of how they define our brand. So you can say all you want, but if someone out there usurps your brand and talks about it in a different way, you might, you'd have to be really careful with that. So very basic branding 101. I just put, it's not just the logo nor the tagline. I'm actually sitting in a design agency in North Sydney right now. I'm running a workshop for them on some big brand in Australia. But, when people go, oh, you're in branding, can you make me a logo or can you make me a website? And nothing against people who do those things, but I have to say, I can do the things that happen before those. So branding for me is almost like an iceberg. And I've got all the piece down there. People see the packaging or the product and the service and potentially your tagline, etc. But everything that underpins it, people don't see, but you need to get it right for them to actually, as you say what it is that you want your brand to mean to them. So let's just dive into this in a bit more detail, right? We're going to talk about quite big things here. I might help to signpost it and just say, the brand is bigger than its parts, obviously, but there is a brand DNA, which are all the elements, all the pieces that form it. The verbal brand is how we communicate it, like verbally, and then visual brand is what people look at. Now, I'm not a designer. I was sitting with a group of designers earlier, and I always envy how they can just doodle things and, make it come to life. We'll talk about that for about 5 slides at the end of the presentation, but this discussion focuses on what does our brand stand for? What is the message we want to communicate? And how do we want to communicate it? And especially in a world of social good, which has its own unique challenges. So moving on, I'm not sure. First, the value of a brand. So it is basically at the fundamental level, it's a shortcut to navigate choices. There's so many choices out there in the market. And it used to be, go buy an egg and I'll buy an egg, right? But now you go to the market, oh, is it free range? Is it organic? Does it have extra omega-3? Does it have protein? Has it been socially distanced from other chickens? There's just so many different ways that you actually could. And if you go, oh, but I like this brand, Pace Farms, because this is it. It's a shortcut for me to know I'm getting that benefit and it aligns with my values. So that's one reason we spend so much time working on brands. The other thing is, and I've shared this with other social enterprises in the past, like Jess and Jay would know, is branding versus marketing. I think it's one big difference. We get excited about marketing. I got a brief from a social enterprise. It's more of for purpose organization. It said, oh, can you help us with a branding? We need 1,000 likes and followers. Oh, we need 1,000 followers. And you're exactly saying, well, that's not branding for us. Branding first is defining your message. So I'm showing my 31 years of age and experience here. It's like the analogy is a stereo system. So basically branding is the tuner. You actually go, I need to get it. Is it 99.5 and get it really clear before I blare the speakers and amp it all up. If I can have the biggest speakers, I can have the best social media, but if my branding and message isn't right, then it's not a clear message that they're getting. So that's how we differentiate branding and marketing. They work together, but you got to get the tuner right. Makes sense so far. So, what else is the value of a brand? I mean, obviously, we know that it unifies your campaign. So, whether you do it social media, whether you're talking to investors, whether you're talking to your internal team, the brand unifies it. As a brand manager 31 years ago, as I said, of Oil of Elaine Procter and Gamble, I ran around the whole business because I needed to make sure that R&D and operations and everyone was doing it in the way that I wanted this brand to look like and feel like and be like. And finally, why waste time building a brand? It's about strengthening equity. You want people to be loyal to you. You want people, look, fundamentally, we're businesses, especially for those not in the charity or not for profit space. We, sorry, I just heard something. And basically saying that we need to command a premium. So if your brand is something that people are willing to pay for, you've built it to that level, then they will pay a premium. So bread and butter is a good example for that. Just because it's a social enterprise doesn't mean I charge less. I actually can charge more because I stand for something that actually is bigger than the product I sell. So summarizing that, so what is a good brand? A good brand is a brand is a promise, and a good brand is a promise kept. So on that note, I'm going to start throwing little, I love sort of like, I think Rob would call it, it's not an alliteration, but it's a mnemonic, right? So I'm going to be throwing you 4 C's of a winning brand. This is always what I challenge clients with. Does it meet all 4 C's for you to create a strong brand? Is it customer relevant, which means it meets a real need or it resolves a tension? Is it culturally motivating? And culture here doesn't mean Australian, but if you're in the food culture, are you in tune with the times with food culture? Is it competitively differentiated? So I introduced the concept of FOB. For those, I'm sure for those who've been in Japan, and we know this, 7-Eleven has about 1,200 SKUs they introduce every year, apparently in Japan. But the way for you to get your space in their retail store is you have to be have an F, an O, or a B. Are you first at something? Are you only at something? Are you best at something? That's a challenge you need to ask yourself as a business. How am I competitively differentiated? FOB. And finally, credibility. I can promise you the stars, but if I actually go, well, is it a process? Is it an approach? Why do you trust that I'll deliver this? So that's the 4 C's. I'm going to go through it quickly. Now I want to talk about bread and butter projects. So I don't know if you just want to show of hands or whatever who know these brands, but as I said, they came to us a few years ago. You know it, yay. Love their morning scrolls and stuff. So they came to us. They're a social enterprise of the bread and butter of Burke Street Bakery. And when they came to us, they were a wholesale business. They were B2B, and they wanted to be independent from Burke Street Bakery and be a standalone brand. So we created the whole brand strategy. We created the whole brand design. This was all pro bono work by myself and an agency I worked with. And so the customer relevance there is that people do want, this was at the time people want something good, like sourdough was the thing. And at the same time, basically they wanted to be doing good as well. So the initial target was Marrickville, which is where they were. So it was very much an inner West thinking. So the need there was to do good. And at the same time, while I'm eating this. So I know Sydney siders or maybe other Australians were being crucified for ordering $18 avocado toasts. But if you are going to have a $5 slice of toast, at least it makes you feel good that it is going to something better. And, that I may not be able to buy an apartment, but I'm eating good sourdough that helps other people. So the next one is make it culturally motivating, right? So at that time, it's both from a food culture, it leverages that, but it actually has a bigger need. So not many Australians want to wake up at 2 a.m. to be bakers. Why not get refugees and asylum seekers or hard workers who are actually willing to do this and meet a real need in society, which is we want to keep having our bread. And these are people who are actually willing to put in the hard yards to do that. Then finally, in terms of being, the third one is competitively differentiated. So this is all about, their first thing was, we are Australia's first social enterprise bakery. And from a credibility standpoint, why do I believe your bread is as good as Sonoma's and as, brasserie bread, for example? it is actually the same sourdough starter as the Burke Street Bakery one. So that's a little trivia for you. It was the same starter for those who are in their kombuchas and fermentation world. It was the same starter that they use, and it's kind of a nice analogy that it is the sourdough starter that actually has given birth to this goodness that Bread and Butter Project is. Apologies, it's such a mouthful, that brand name, but TBBP is how we kind of did a bit of a shortcut. So moving on, in terms of the brand strategy, the two questions that you need to ask is, I don't know where you are. If you're trying to build a brand or if you're trying to rebrand, make sure you articulate the brand challenge first. So we have a product, but people don't know about it, or we have a product, but people don't understand it, or we have a brand, but it doesn't seem to connect well to our target. Articulate that challenge. And the most important thing is, for me, branding is only successful if you shift perception or behavior. So in this case, the question was, oh, is their bread really going to be good? Because if it's actually made by trainee bakeries, I don't think it's going to be as good as a bread as it is. And second is as well, why do we need to actually, support bakeries that do this? Why don't we support what they're calling Australian brands? So those were the challenges we faced. So that's the two Qs, and I'm just going through it quickly and I'll recap. So you've got your 4 Cs, we've got the 2 Qs, and now let's talk about the Ws, which are really the fundamentals of brand strategy. So defining who your target is very critical. And we'll talk about that in an example in my second section, which is your target is not just your consumer, you're targeting investors as well, you're targeting the community and all that stuff. So understanding that. What is your offer to them and your promise? And then finally, what are your proof points? So why would I believe you? So here's my target. What does he need? And why would I believe it? And all of that would be wrapped by the last letter, which is H, is how you bring it to life. So let me just break this down a bit, because I know that's quite a lot of the W's and the H's. So as an example, for Bread and Butter, how they've defined, or how we defined the who then, because if there's anything I've learned in the number of years that I'm doing branding, it is about people. You almost have to be is a David Attenborough of marketing and branding. You have to be so interested in people and observe them and dissect. If you don't like people, don't do branding. So I'm always out there going, oh, why is she eating that? Oh, why is she using that? You kind of have to get into that space. And so this is it. We bring them to life, and they're called the foodies with a purpose. We're talking, these are the people who just want to actually be anyone from working in the city to suburban families. So I know you describe that, and this is a discipline that I think a lot of businesses do now, but really get into their shoes. Why would they want you? Why are they attracted to you? So these are the people who just want to basically say the less compromise between eating well, the passion to eat, and supporting the community, the better they feel in making their choices. That's how we define the W. The what and the why, and this is a shortcut. We obviously have decks to these. So basically the message of Bread and Butter was, we make delicious artisan baked goods. What else do? We provide opportunity for people seeking refuge and asylum seekers, and we create a positive social impact in the community. That's as simplistic as we have. And the proof point is, we are founded by Burke Street Bakery, which means that we actually can bake really all these goods, and at the same time we've got the resources to actually train up these refugees and asylum seekers to give them a path to employment. So that's not enough, because that's all the verbal brand that's kind of under our iceberg, if you recall. The challenge we have now is, okay, we can talk about this, we know all of these messages, how is it going to come out to the public at large and to those who want to engage with our brand? I'm not sure how many of you are familiar. I'm not going to go through the whole archetypes and all that stuff, but essentially bringing your brand to life, because a bread is a bread is a bread, until you actually wrap it up with a persona and how it talks and stuff. So the persona we used for Bread and Butter was, hello, Jamie Oliver, of course. Jamie just represented that sort of, he was positively energetic, he was infectious, he was courageous, expressive, imaginative, but at the same time, he was a reformer, you know? He was not doing it, he wasn't waving flags, but he was just like, eat really good food. Kids, question what's in your chicken nuggets and that sort of of things. So we thought Burke Street Bakery was that. And one other thing I want to point out was he was the man who initially almost coined perfectly imperfect. I think we hear that a lot now. And that was one of the challenges Bread and Butter had, was people think like, oh, your sourdough is a bit wonky. Why isn't it all perfectly cut and everything? But we actually go use that as the persona, because these are people who are learning how to bake. It's all about us. You know, you don't have to be perfect. And in the same way that these bakers are learning, you know, go on the journey with them. And that sourdough you get made by Sharif is different from the sourdough made by that. So we used it as our story, and that was born of it being Jamie Oliver. It wasn't Gordon Ramsay, for example, or Nigella as our brand persona. So hopefully that kind of gives you a bit of a steer in terms of that. And I'll just skip that. So I've talked a mile a minute. 4 C's: consumer relevance, credible, competitively differentiated, and culturally motivating. I've just been told that the Bread and Butter Project has just won the Global Good Awards. So, because we pat on the back, basically doing all the right thing. What I wanted you to do at this stage is just have a bit of a practice in terms of articulating your brand promise. So as we've said at the start, a brand is a brand is a promise, and a good brand is a promise kept. So I just want us to get into that space of articulating what our brand is across the W's. Who is it for? Why do they want this product? What benefit does it give them? And I'm actually going to try and do this to make it quite easy in a world where we're all representing different businesses and different brands. I'd like you to do it for Bread and Butter Project. I'm hoping that everything I've talked about kind of gives you a sense of who they are. Jess is going to put you into breakout rooms that basically would, your task is promise me something, Bread and Butter. So here's a little template that you can fill out. And I'm hoping that you can use that for your businesses as well after this session, is to really succinctly articulate what your brand promise is. So for people who believe that, so for foodies with a purpose, that was our target, who believe that blank and who want or need something, the Bread and Butter Project is the first, only, best, or you can just describe it as the social, or it's the artisan bakery, social enterprise that does this, that gives this, that helps this, so that you, foodie with a purpose, can feel this. So essentially, what's the target need? What are you offering? And what is the benefit to them? And I'd love to challenge you if you can kind of I'll show you what they came up with as a tagline, but have a bit of a hashtag. So if you had to summarize your offer, what would Bread and Butter Project be? So maybe I'll do that. So just as a giveaway, you can borrow it, because if you feel like that's saying what it is, but we came up with things like loaves for better lives, hashtag loaves for better lives, or hashtag food that makes you feel good. If you can come up with something even funkier and more succinct, I'd love to borrow with pride whatever ideas you can come up with. Does that make sense? So I think, Jess, you're going to be sharing either a link, but I'm going to go back to the previous slide. If it's easier for you to just take a screenshot, just a photo on your phone when you break out into your groups. And if you can take this, and we'll give you maybe about 7 minutes to do it, workshop 7 minutes, and just fill it out for us. You can just write it down in your own little notebooks, or type it up somewhere, and we'll see who wants to share when we come back. Any questions? Is that cool? Jess, you're happy to put them in the
Ready
rooms? Sorry, yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm not doing the full screen. Okay, is everyone back?
Yeah.
Great. How'd you guys go with the exercise? Was that easy? Difficult? I'm just going to be brave here and say, and I hope that someone is wanting to share. Does anyone want to share something, how they articulated the brand promise? And if, just really quickly read it, and maybe what the hashtag is if you got to get to that point. Does anyone want to just unmute and talk. Otherwise, I'm going to be calling names.
I'm happy to do it, Emma.
Oh, great. Great, thanks.
So I had, for people who believe that good food matters and want to spend where it makes a difference, the Bread Project is the first social enterprise providing bakery products, giving refugees and asylum seekers career options and a new life. And hashtag bread building lives.
Nice. Yeah, I like it. Friend with the lives. Did you find that kind of easy to build the story from the promise to the actual benefit and getting to, did you?
I think it's a really nice framework, actually, to build it as you suggested. So I have to think about how that works for my brand, but I think it's a really nice framework.
Oh, great.
Whether it was easy, still, there's a bit of wordsmithing to go on there.
Yeah, I agree. And look, it's always one of those, right? This is what we love about branding. There's no, right or wrong, but I think it's that framework. So if you find it like it signposts the things that a brand should be promising and how it should talk. Thanks for sharing. I love that. Thank you so much. And I love the hashtag as well. Thank you. Just one more, maybe. Anyone else? Any team that's happy to share?
Hi, Natalie Bramble here from I Click to Learn. I'll just, it's still a bit too wordy, but I definitely need to get there and I'm not happy with the hashtag. But and I put it in chat as well, but I've just said for people who believe that community organisations need the knowledge and tools to do their work, I Click to Learn is Australia's first on-demand learning library and 12-month guided learning program, so that they can increase confidence in their role to deliver social change. So still needs work, but.
Okay, yeah. And you know what, as we say, it's that the wordsmithing, and this is why, once you get to that level of, you need copywriting and stuff, but just that discipline of really saying, who is it for? Why does it exist and stuff? May sound really logical, but yeah, thanks for sharing that. And okay, just one last, Rob, did you want to share it? Did you have anything?
Yeah, I did. I've got one for Bread and Butter Project and for Pocket City Farms, where I also work. Which one would you like me to share?
Let's do Bread and Butter, just so it kind of, let's see how it, yeah.
Okay, so I went with, I feel like this was as good as the first one, but I went with, for people who believe everyone deserves a fair go and love awesome bread, the Bread and Butter Project is Australia's #1, first social enterprise bakery that trains asylum seekers and refugees to be bakers so they can be employed, empowered and included in Australian society.
Brilliant.
Hashtag awesome bread.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Awesome to help, awesome to do good. Yeah, great. As I said, I think as well, when I talk to my next section, Bread and Butter is kind of evolving as well in terms of the brand. And this is done 4 or 5 years ago now. And this is my selfish way of trying to look for new taglines. But yeah, Loaves for Better Lives, food that makes you feel good is where we kind of are at. And it's actually in all the packaging. So thanks for that, guys. That was really, hopefully that gives you a sense of a framework of how to think about your brand promise. And then now we'll move on into this was just my marker. So it was now into the more, I just find it a bit more exciting because we kind of bring it to life. So for those who attend focus groups, this is when the facilitator says, guys, imagine Mercedes-Benz walks in a room. Who would he be? What would he be wearing? What would he be like? Because that, in essence, people relate to your brand as if it were another person. This is what I always say. Do I actually want to hang out with this person, or do I actually go, oh, I kind of like it, but I don't want to be with them? So this exercise, a lot of design agencies use this as well because it gives the designers a bit of a feel as to what the look and feel is of your brand. What I'd love for you to do, and this time we're not talking Bread and Butter Project. If you have your own businesses, think of your own businesses. If you're working for an organization, or if you're planning to launch something, think of your brand. I'd love for you can do it 2 ways. You can think of it in terms of what it is today, if it already exists. Or if you go, I'm not really happy with this brand. I've worked with a lot of brands who go, we're not happy with where we are. Can you rebrand us? So you can talk about it, what you want it to be tomorrow. The exercise is almost like a personality bingo. And you can change it. So if your brand were an animal, what would it be? And then why would it be that? And because it's this. So superhero, I love doing this. I ran a workshop yesterday for a big tech design data systems company, and it was a different exercise, but I used the superhero. And one of them actually said, oh, we're Incredible Hulk because we're data, we're so smart, we create all these solutions, we're super, super smart. But if you make us really angry, we're going to be a big monster and we're just going to gobble you because we've got the scale. So that's kind of not good, which is why they wanted to transition. But think of it as a brand that's like a superhero, for example. It's going to be an individual exercise at this stage because you all have different businesses. Maybe choose one or two in this bingo card, and think of your brand that way. So if it were a restaurant, it would be fast food because it's just quick and easy and it's accessible to everyone versus etc. So if you're happy to do that, I think we're giving you about 5 minutes. Fill out one or two of these blocks. I'm just going to leave it up on the screen, and if you can just scribble that. So just, yeah, I'd love for you to do superhero as one of them. This is my bias, and then you can choose the other one. So make sense? So that's it's not for bread and butter. Back to continue. So let me just look at that slide. Great. So guys, just anyone want to, and I know you, if you can just kind of give a little bit of an intro as to what your business is and stuff. I might, let me just, oops. Okay, here we go. So anyone wants to share what their brands, either superhero or whatever element is in that box that you've decided, and more importantly, why you chose it?
I'll go ahead.
Sure.
So I'm currently in the fellowship program, and I'm sort of working on and thinking through a social enterprise in the contraceptive space. So I chose Wonder Woman because of the strength, of the boldness, of the feeling of empowerment, but also the femininity.
Brilliant, brilliant. Now that's just a great match, both from almost the target and the market itself, as well as the personality, right? Empowerment. Thanks for that, Kendra. I think we'll be chatting more about that. Anyone else? Come on, let's be brave, be a superhero. Brandish your little superpowers. Rob?
I'll go quickly. So I've got this Pocket City Farms, which is like a sustainability hub in Sydney. I've said if Pocket City Farms was a superhero, it would be Captain Planet, because our small urban farm is fighting to inspire and empower people across Australia to care for the world.
Right.
I chose Captain Planet because I'm a child of the 80s. So.
Well, this is when you start showing what your generation is with the superheroes you choose as well, with like Dr. X and stuff. And I would love to call Jess or Kate for Social Impact Hub, but yeah. So guys, it sounds like it's fun or anything, but I think the superhero one is quite useful, especially in our space, because we do actually have a role to play. And I think it's important to ask ourselves, what are we rescuing people from? What are we actually doing that, as mortals, potentially they may not do in their daily lives? So what are we empowering them as superhero social enterprises, for example, is a good question. Now, this exercise is actually used as well to come up with values. So I've heard that. So empowerment, we're about being kind, we're about being, just generous, for example. So use this as a way to get to your values, because one of the, I'm going to say this now, pet peeves I have as a brand strategist is when people go, okay, here's my brand. What are my values? Oh, it's trust, quality, and was, just motherhood statements that almost don't mean anything. So I think you need to push yourself to say, what is your values? And personality as well. They go, oh, we're actually, we're friendly and we're, accessible and stuff. And I'm going, well, no one wants a non-friendly brand, right? So push yourself to say, what is your brand personality? Because anyone who interacts with your brand needs something more specific. And again, from a design point of view, you actually say, okay, give me something more than I'm nice and I'm friendly and accessible. So I would just encourage you to do that. So now let's move on to the next section. For those who joined late, as I've said, that was my foray and rant, and actually not rant, but my happy segment that shows that 30 years of fundamentals of brand building still hold true today. What I'm going to transition to now is actually the world of branding for, in terms of, sorry, let me just, yeah, principles of social enterprise branding. Now I call it principles as an overstatement, but it's just really stuff that I've learned, that I've taken from my life in the for-profit world and transitioned to this, and what have we really learned in branding in social enterprises. So now, without really kind of overcomplicating things, but one of the big things is, if as a social enterprise or a for-profit organization, or or a not-for-profit, for example, which I think we've got in the room right now, congratulations guys, because you're already off to a good start. I've done quite a lot of workshops where clients are dying to define a purpose. So, oh, we sell chocolate bars. What's our purpose? I sell, shampoos. What's my purpose and stuff? So what I do is try and tell them, don't say I'm here to reach for you. I'm here to help people reach their full potential, is where we always end up. But I go, let's really trying to be a bit more practical, but that's not our issue. What you're doing as social enterprises and being brands in the world of good is you actually have your why. So that's such a good start. It's more about talking about this. How do you talk about it? What is your message? And what is the bundle that you actually bring to the market that actually allows people to relate to you more than just, all the other brands out there? So I'm not going to spend time saying your why is something you should sort out. I'm hoping that's already given. The unique challenges that I've seen in this world that I've been kind of, initially dabbling, but as Jess knows, I'm really quite keen to get more and more into doing this space. Is that there are three things that we face as a social enterprise in terms of challenges. One is, it is that balance of purpose and profit. And I know, and I use that in that order. In the for-profit world, it's obviously profit, and they're trying to define a purpose, but purpose and profit as two messages that need to be communicated. The second challenge is you have so many audiences. Now I know that brands in the FMCG world, in the for-profit world, also have many audiences, but in your case, I think social enterprises and not-for-profits have even more audiences to communicate. They have the community, they've got investors and all that to communicate to. So with many different layers to pull. So how do we optimize our resources in doing that? Which leads to the third one, which is we don't have the deep pockets usually of those big corporations. What have I learned that actually allows us to meet number one and number two challenges with the limited resources we have? So let's just go through each of these challenges and how I've seen not only Bread and Butter, but other organizations address this as well. So obviously Jess and her team at Social Impact have a wealth of experience in this, and a separate convo. I'm sure that they can contribute like case studies about this. So the first thing is, how do we create balance between heart and mind? Now, again, as a marketeer in the for-profit world, we always say it has to have an emotional benefit and a functional benefit. But in this case, I think it is even trickier as social enterprises, because those two messages are both equally strong. So what you need to define first is, what is really the tension? It's a tension usually between the social narrative, doing good, and at the same time, the commercial proposition. So the challenge is, you are actually making people choose you, pay for you, and at the same time, you're trying to deliver a social benefit, right? So in this case, in Bread and Butter's case, they go, we are a great cause, but we want to make sure that the great bread story doesn't kind of fall to the wayside. It's the same thing that I'm doing a project with a construction company that employs refugees and asylum seekers as well. And the question we get is, oh, great, you're helping refugees, asylum seekers become, contributing Australians in terms of the construction industry. But is their work going to be good? Is it going to be below par? Because they're not, we don't know if they're trained well enough and stuff. So the balance between the quality of what you sell and the social element is the challenge that I have found most social enterprises face. And that's what you should be addressing in your messaging in terms of communicating your brand promise. So what did we do in Bread and Butter Project? As we've said,
sorry, can I just interrupt for 1 second? Your slides aren't up. Should they be? There are no slides.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
You should just show your screen. No.
Oh, I have been navigating.
That's what I thought. That's why I just jumped into.
Yeah, okay.
There's a few people in the chat that have pointed out as well. There's no slides, and I'm pretty sure you're talking to slides.
I am talking to slides. So let me just so this, you can't see this? No?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Maybe on. Let me just check. It's up on my screen, up on the big screen. What about this one? Yes? No?
No.
Oh, because I can put to desktop. It's supposed to be the desktop too. Apologies, guys.
If you unshare and then reshare, it overcomes that problem.
Yeah, it's because I've actually got let me just try. Yeah, let me just see if this is working.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I get for having like 3 monitors, I think. I was just navigating out of something. So great. Well, great. Thank you for pointing that out, Jess. I will now go into, yes. So the dual messaging, which is, as we've said, and I think some of you have articulated it even better, loaves for better lives. And I'm now jumping a bit into design element as well. So our designer then really wanted to take even the ampersand to really dial it up. So anything that Bread and Butter does now is like, they basically say this plus this. So feel good and this. So they use the and as almost a linkage between the social story and the actual product story is how we've done it across the designs. So the other thing is, I was just going to say, in terms of communicating your story, what I'm finding now is, and I'll explain this in a little bit, is do you have a point of difference beyond the social angle? What I have discovered is, obviously, as social entrepreneurs, we champion our cause and we keep talking about how good we really are, but sometimes it's not enough. And you kind of say, well, if my choice are commercial or for profit options, why won't I just go for them? So in this case, I was working with a social disability accommodation provider. And what they found was, yes, we actually do good and we're for purpose, but our difference is we are actually commercial property developers, which is almost like we actually have the quality and the kudos to deliver this. So I guess my only point is sometimes we tend to balance it off too much and talk about the social angle too much, that people who are actually in this the broader base of the market are actually saying, I'm not just comparing you with social enterprises, I'm actually comparing you with other options as well. So Bread and Butter, why am I going to buy you versus Sonoma versus all of that? So you need to have that dual message communicated. So in this case, we had many audiences, as we said. What happens normally with social enterprises is we get the advocates. I don't want to call them influencers anymore because it connotes a totally different thing in terms of influencers. But we get the advocates, they buy into our story. It's the refugees and asylum seekers up there. But as we go mainstream, we want to scale up. The challenge is I'm talking to other consumers, for example, or customers who actually might not just buy into the course. And I need to know more about the product and the credential story. So we needed to keep dialing up more. The bread story is what's happening now with bread and butters. So really showing that you can make great bread. You got all those Instagram posts, our blogs and stuff is really dialing up the element of the brand, sorry, of the product, more than just the social element. Similarly, we also talk to investors and partners versus customers, right? So the messaging, and I'm sorry, it's just text there, but even in the way we talk about it, I'm sure, those who are a bit more further into the journey, into their branding, is when you talk to investors and people that you want to actually, buy into your businesses, we talk about the impact versus when you're talking about, hey, do you want to become a bread and butter stockist? Our story is that we've got a delicious artisan bread range, we've got pastries, we've got that. So those duality just really need to be balanced. And the checkpoint is every time we come up with a communication, we do have a grid and say, here's the audience, this is what we want to tell them. Here's the other audience, this is what we want to tell them. I mean, it sounds logical, but it's easier said than done. Jess knows this as well, like in terms of a lot of social enterprises, they get so excited and they talk in their language and they said, this is what we're going to do. This is exactly what it is. And, when they talk to the more mainstream people or investors who aren't in that space, they glaze over because they go, I just want to sell this property unit and I want to sell all these blocks. I don't know what you're trying to tell me. So talk in their language as well. And the same thing with corporates versus community. So bread and butter works a lot with Westpac. So that's a different language. They get there and they get their employees involved versus the right one there is with the community in really talking to fellow social entrepreneurs and in this for social space. They do a big deal out of the graduation ceremony. So I've attended that. It kind of makes people in the community recognize them as well. So they feature their recent graduates, they tell their stories and that sort of thing. So I guess it's just really segmenting your different angles and messaging and targeting it to the right audience. And if you have to do something that incorporates both, make sure that it is a balanced sort of messaging. So I leave you with, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. We've had a question which is probably quite appropriate to jump in and ask here. Someone's asked, how's Burke Street Bakery ensure they're not directly competing with the bread and butter projects?
Brilliant question. In a way that that's actually one of the first business challenges they've had. It's very easy. In the one hand, it's a channel thing. So Burke Street Bakery will always be a retail store. They will have their standalone stores, and that's what they're going to do. They're leaving the bread and butter project initially as wholesale. And this is in my next slide really is, and I know they're now in supermarkets and stuff, but this question, the delineation is a channel thing. So bread and butter project will never have a standalone shop. Burke Street Bakery would be a cafe, basically. Like you can't actually buy Burke Street Bakery in supermarkets or anything. You can only buy it where it is Burke Street Bakery. Does that answer your question? It's not a very sexy branding. So it's really a channel strategy that they've just chosen at this stage. And as a side point to that, they've actually really tried. They now have a separate P&L. So they're operating these two businesses quite independently to give to have sort of like a clearer delineation as to measures and KPIs and stuff. Cool. So just really quickly now, so it's a journey as well, as I've said, the tendency of most businesses is social enterprises is let's dial up the social dimension when we're gaining advocacy and investment, and the product kind of is there. And then when they're scaling for growth, we need to start talking product. I mean, the middle ground is obviously the balance that you want to achieve. Now, moving on to the second challenge, or the second thing that I've learned is staying true and setting up for the future. So what this really means is, what is your core? And I think Rai started with enterprises that have been challenged to pivot during the COVID era. And so this is the challenge most brands face. It's like, this is what we are. We will never be this. It goes from anywhere to, I've worked with Magnum and Kit Kat, and sorry, I'm not belittling things, but you know, they do have big discussions. Oh, if it's not a finger and a chocolate and a wafer, it'll never be Kit Kat. We can never launch that. To, okay, we'll do something else. Same thing as Toyota. Will always be accessible. We want to have something luxury. Oh my God, we're going to go into premium. So this is about, when do you stay true? What are the elements of your brand that are
speaking?
Say hello.
Thanks, Lawrence. Yes, definitely.
Oh, it's just a conversation I'm hearing. Is that a question? Yeah, I'll keep going. I think it's a conversation. So I think the other challenge I have for you guys is make sure you stay true to what you are, but also be open and flexible to pivoting. So in this case, they define their purpose, their place, which is a good segue, actually, whoever asked the question. Purpose, the place, the product, and the personality and values, right? This is the key elements that Bread and Butter is built on. And when they said, oh my God, our business it was down 92% during COVID. They were wholesale, they were catering to cafes and corporates. We all know that shut down. And they said, what are we gonna do? Because this is how we've defined the business. What they've done then is obviously said, what are the things we're willing to let go and stretch? And they said, we'll still keep to our purpose. We're never going to be a commercial venture. We need to keep doing that. We're going to keep our personality and values. But what we're going to change is, can we expand our products and not just sourdoughs and all that stuff? But at the same time, you guys still hear me? Yeah. Okay. And then the bit that really changed was the place. So as I've said earlier, the initial thing was they were B2B, and they will never go straight to consumers, but their business was going to die if they didn't. And luckily, thanks to Cindy Carpenter, who is the CEO of that board, Woolies jumped into the picture and actually says, we're willing to take you into our metro stores. Are you willing to actually service us? And that's the other bit that proudly I tell myself and our designers then, when we created our brand identity and you know, everything about Bread and Butter, we said we were B2B, but we were always had this vision of becoming B2C. We could have just made the packaging brown bags because no one was seeing it at that time, right? You just go throw it in. No one knows what it's going to look like, because the cafes open it and slice it up. No one knows what it is. But we were ready with products and packs that actually were consumer friendly. So when Woolies got us into their stores in the metros, we had packs that are actually, I'd have to say, like, beautiful to look at versus just a wholesale thing. We aligned with them, and they actually have an in-store bakery now and that sort of thing. So we pivoted and basically just said that, look, we're ready to let go of just being a wholesale business. We needed to do this, and we were primed to do this. I think it's just, and I think, Kate, you'd have another example of that with Farm Wall. We had a few businesses in our other programs that actually had to change and say, the corporates are gone. Let's be ready to do consumer offers. And the role of online here is obviously quite critical. We were lucky that we got Woolies. The last one is, as I've said, with limited resources, collaborating and tapping into culture that share your values. So very quickly, Bread and Butter partners with Westpac. It's quite big, a big partnership, and with their current sort of for purpose statement of brands who help communities, that definitely fit. Woolies Metro got us into there because we're creating a better tomorrow. And even Minter Ellison, a big law firm, obviously, is definitely with us on this one. And they actually have a cafe in their corporate offices that do sell bread and butter, that do have bread and butter project for their employees. So I would encourage that. We were selling bread. So sourdough, again, is quite it was such a vibrant culture, foodie culture. So we've got Terry Durack to give us endorsements. When people were going, is that a good enough bread? We actually had this, we had little signboards in the supermarket saying, Terry Durack, critic of Sydney Morning Herald, Good Food Guide, gives us a thumbs up. It's good bread for good cause. We're partnering with cafes and all that stuff. So leverage culture. If you have a business or a brand that actually can live with a broader culture, that will be really great. And finally, connect within the community. This is what I love about the Social Impact Hub. Like, I run these talks, and after this, someone would come and say, hey, you know what, can we actually partner? So Why Waste, a food wastage organization. After the talk I gave them last week, I introduced them to the Bread and Butter Project, and they're kind of doing something. So we're not in this, it's a classic, we're in this together kind of thing. So I'm encouraging you to reach out, because the resources we have is just within us. So we can tap into the corporate world, but at the same time, look for brands that align, look for similar Wonder Woman brands, for example, Kendra, and see what you can actually do with them and actually optimize how we communicate our brands. So that's the sort of learning. And as I say, if I summarize it, really, balancing heart and mind, thinking very much about how true you will be to today, but making sure that you're poised for tomorrow. For social enterprises, we just have to be pivoting really fast. And finally, share and care. If there's an industry or a category where there's a bit more desire to be generous and collaborate, I think we're in that space, and let's just tap into each other's sort of resources in terms of getting our brands out there. So I'll take 3 seconds to breathe. What I'm going to say is I'm going to skip this, Rob, because we're going to be giving you some sort of frameworks and templates at the end after this session, Rob, right? But essentially, what I was just going to say is, for those who have been working in branding, I can give you onions, pyramids, blueprints, DNAs, whatever. There's so many templates. I really am not precious about it, but as you construct your brands, it's the thinking. Try and put the rigor of what we've talked about, the 4 C's, the W's, and the H. Put that into the thinking, and I don't really care what template you use. But having said that, we will give you some frameworks that you can hopefully use in your business. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a primer in terms of, so what? We've articulated a verbal brand. How do we bring it to life? I'm not going to tell you how to be a creative. This is just to, I wouldn't say avoid, but I've had a couple of businesses come to me recently in the social enterprise space as well, going, we just launched our website, whatever, but we're not happy. It doesn't align to the brand strategy. Can we just totally change the look again? So I would say, if you can actually have your strategy and your look and feel aligned before you even do anything, then you avoid the rework of actually all the website design and all the logo design. Just get it down pat and have it clear. So what is the visual brand? It is the logo. It's all the elements that come to it, your colors, and I'll talk about it in a second. So what is most important is that your brand essence or idea aligns with who you are. So these are brands I've recently worked with. So Starlight was all about keep shining. And as you can see, their logo is all about, and their look and feel is about reaching. It's always a star guiding you and making you shine, regardless of where you are in your journey as a sick child. We've done community construction, building homes, building lives. I think it kind of aligns with someone's bread and lives earlier. And better homes in thriving communities. This is the social disability organization. So just really seeing that these two align, your verbal brand and your visual brand. I just wanted to show you the value or the potency of and the power of branding. And I know sometimes people go, oh, it's easy. I can just whack in a few colors and stuff. But Starlight Foundation, coming from there, we've shifted. It isn't exactly that big, but you can see that it's a bit more solid now. And it is just definitely what their challenge then at that time was. It was just being seen as a fun brand. It makes kids laugh and smile, but there's actually a lot of science and, you know, the science of positive psychology behind it. So we kind of solidified that. The second is a bigger example. He was just a tiling services. He's an Afghan refugee. And I think he's in your program, Jess. He's going to be joining your Scaling Impact. So Hedayat is an Afghan refugee. He was just a tiling service. He wants to go big now, and we rebranded him as Community Construction. Unity with the platforms and stuff. So again, as I've said, this is all coming from strategy that you don't see, but this is how it actually is brought to life. So just really thinking about how we bring ourselves to life visually is important. You can all get this in your wonderful takeaways, but again, just saying, if you come up across a designer and you say, hey, I've got this business, can you just make me a logo? please don't tell them that. It'll be such an offense to them. They need a proper creative brief. Tell me what you really want, because anyone can design a logo, but if you want it to be on strategy, you need to give them more than that. So what I'm going to say is how I found it helpful, even for, I've helped, like Nick is particularly a 1-2 person team, is that start with a brand strategy we talked about, try and come up with conceptual directions. So if I'm all about building homes and building lives, what are the different directions it can take? Is it more about this is where your superhero thing comes in. Am I a bit more polished and a bit more an architecture creative guy, or am I a bit more just a regular bloke and a tradie and that sort of thing? So do that, create mood boards if you can, then brief your agency or your designer or your, in my case, I think Jess and I work with someone, I go, bring your creative guy, and it was her brother. So it was just a family affair, but we were happy and we were all kind of in a room constructing strategy and design together, but with a firm guideline. And this is, as I've said, it avoids the, oh, I like purple. No, I don't like purple. Oh, I think pink is this versus pink is that. When we actually know what it represents, and I'm sorry if I'm talking really basic, but it just avoids us and gets us efficiency in terms of building our brand. So finally, as I've said, creative brief. There's many ways you can do this. I've just listed down the elements of what you normally would brief, either even yourself or an agency, but try and have the discipline to say, we have defined a verbal brand. This is what I want the visual brand to be. So I'm going to be sharing this template with you as well. The one thing I want to say as well is what I've learned in the world of social enterprises. It used to be, oh, we don't really, it's fine, we're doing good. It's like how charity was, buying a pencil. It doesn't really mean, it doesn't have to look good. And I don't mean to be shallow, but people buy in terms of imagery. So I actually want it to look as premium as how you tell me this product is like. So from an exploration point of view, from our bread and butter, we looked at the tonality. As we've said, we're about perfectly imperfect. So as you can see, in some of our, it's more a hand font for some of our work, and then the bread and butter as a stamp is how to show that it's professional. So it's the juxtaposition. We allowed ourselves to fonts to do that. The colors we inherited, by the way. So if someone's going to ask, why are you yellow? What does yellow mean? We did inherit that, and the owners actually said, let's keep to those colors because that's what we want to be. So we then designed the communications, as you can say, as consistently as possible. And then from an application point of view, down to their delivery trucks, aprons, whatever. And if you're a service industry as well, we've done it for Nick Tiling. He's totally repainted it. Any touch point should be consistent in terms of what your brand look and feel is, as well as your brand strategy. So on that note, I've actually met a few of these guys. I just love them. They're just great when you hear their stories. Actually, one of them was from Burma. He's not here. And he said, when I first came to Australia as a Burmese, refugee, I didn't even know what sourdough was. And now I'm making it. And, just the joy of actually contributing to the community and being part of it. So yeah, I just really hope that what we've talked about has kind of inspired you, that brands can help you in your journey into building your brands. So yeah, be good and build your brands. That's that, unless there's very big questions. And I think Rob has some little tasks or housekeeping things to do, but yeah, I can't see the chat room, Rob, so if you want to ask me anything.
I'll jump in. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them. But yeah, a huge thank you, Irma, for your time today and contributing to this workshop series. Fantastic, really helpful from my perspective. I've just been sitting here making notes, so thank you for that. One thing we just ask everyone to do, we'd love your feedback on the session. And so Jess is going to put a little link into the chat now. It's a super quick survey, so it'll probably take you, less than a minute to complete, but it really helps us just to hear from you what you thought, what we can offer in the next series of workshops that are coming up. So we'd really appreciate it if you could just take a couple of minutes to fill that out before you jump off today. And from my side, the next thing to tell you is we have our next workshop coming up in 2 weeks on the 4th of June, and it's a really great topic. We've been hearing a lot about the need to think digitally post-COVID. So it's how to position your organization with digital strategy and thinking about the transformation for digital transformation. So please join us for that, and there'll be some more comms coming out about that soon. And we will pass back to you, Irma, for some questions that seem to be coming down here. Lots of thank yous, which is great. Just see this. No, I don't think we have any other questions as the last point. I'll just open it up. If anyone wants to jump in on the, feel free to shout out if you have any questions. Otherwise, we will wrap up there.
Yep, on time. Jess, we're on time this time. Well, hopefully that was helpful. Thanks very much for attending, everyone. And I think some of you I'll be having one-on-ones with. We'll just have future chats.
Wonderful. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a lovely weekend, and hopefully we'll see you at a session soon.
Guys, thanks everyone. See ya. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.